Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea's consumer inflation comes in below zero again, leading to worries about possible deflation and calls for the central bank to cut rates more aggressively. Amid the outbreak of African swine fever, the price of pork in Korea falls as people choose not to buy it because of health concerns. The virus, however, does not harm humans. And despite South Korean President Moon-Jae-in sending a friendly letter to the Prime Minister of Japan, reports say a summit meeting between them next month is still unlikely. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. A Japanese media outlet is reporting that it's unlikely there'll be a summit next month between President Moon-Jae-in and Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, despite the friendly letter Moon sent Abe expressing the need for such talks. A report Wednesday in the Yomiuri Shimbun said that when the Japanese PM received the letter, he asked that South Korea create an opportunity to improve relations. And according to the paper, a high-ranking official said the ball is now in Seoul's court. Moon sent the letter to Abe via South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon, who visited Japan this month for the enthronement of Emperor Naruhito. There's a new memoir out about the first few years of U.S. President Donald Trump's time in office. And in it, the author says Trump had accused Seoul of being a major abuser when it comes to the cost of stationing American troops in the country. Kim Yo-sun reports.
President Trump has reportedly called for Seoul to pay significantly more in defense costs ever since taking office in early 2017, repeatedly explaining that South Korea is, quote, taking advantage of Washington in the area of defense. This is according to former U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis's speechwriter Guy Snodgrass, who has published a new book titled Holding the Line: Inside Trump's Pentagon with Secretary Mattis. The author states that during the Pentagon's first briefing to Trump in July 2017, the U.S. president called Seoul, quote, a major abuser, even noting it would be a better deal to have South Korea pay at least $60 billion in defense costs annually. This is 12 times the $5 billion that Washington has reportedly brought up during the defense sharing cost negotiation between the two allies. According to the book, Trump also called the previous Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement, quote, criminal during a meeting at the Pentagon. The remarks not only showed Trump's impromptu style, but also his fundamental attitude towards U.S. allies. The author also recalls that Trump caught all his staff off guard when he announced that Seoul, Washington would put a halt to their joint military drills following a Singapore summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Snodgrass said there was no prior notice from the White House, but did not elaborate whether Mattis was also not informed in advance. The book also described that no provocative words like Little Rocket Men were in the initial draft of President Trump's now infamous speech to the UN General Assembly in late 2017, implying there were many last-minute changes made to Trump's remarks. The book also contains other anecdotes from meetings with President Trump and key cabinet members that the author witnessed. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The floor leader of the Centrist Bareunmirae Party, Oh Shin-hwan, has stressed the importance of what he calls responsible politics. In a policy speech at the National Assembly today, Oh called the current situation an economic disaster. He said the government needs to focus on revitalizing the market through regulatory and labor reforms. Oh addressed the ruling party's plan to set up an independent unit to investigate corruption among high-ranking public officials, which he said will only create another massively powerful organization under the government. On North Korea, he said the Moon-Jae-in administration is too focused on solving the issue through dialogue and should instead focus on denuclearizing the regime. A private ceremony is being held at a cathedral in Busan for the mother of President Moon Jae-in, who died yesterday of a chronic illness. Kang Han-ok was 92 years old. In a Facebook message this morning, President Moon politely asked Blue House and government officials not to visit to pay their respects, but to continue to focus on state affairs instead. Many high-profile officials still went, but presidential security guards are stopping them at the door and even sending back their condolence flowers. Those officials turned away include some of his closest aides, including former presidential secretary for Civil Affairs and Justice, Lee Ho-chul. An exception, however, was Son Hak-kyu, leader of the Bareunmirae Party, a minor opposition party. He told reporters the president shared memories of his mother while also listening to his thoughts on the domestic economy. There are growing concerns in South Korea about possible deflation. Last month's consumer inflation was negative for a second month in a row. At minus 0.4%, it was the lowest rate in all of the OECD, prompting some to call for more aggressive rate cuts by the Bank of Korea. Yoon Jung-min has more.
Last month, South Korea's consumer price inflation remained the lowest among OECD members and even 2B members, mainly because of lower demand from the private sector. Data released by the OECD on Wednesday showed South Korea's consumer price index was minus 0.4% in September. That's far below the OECD average of 1.9%. The consumer price index for the U.S. was 1.7%, 0.8% for the euro area, and 0.2% for Japan. In fact, South Korea saw one of the sharpest declines in its inflation rate than any other OECD member during the past year. Last September, the consumer price index for South Korea was just above 2%, lower than the OECD average but higher than the euro area. However, South Korea's index turned negative this year while other G20 countries, including the US and Japan, all remained above zero. Experts say concerns are growing on the back of sluggish private investment and consumption as well as lower agricultural product prices. The Korea Development Institute said the falling consumer price index was not just attributable to the supply side, but to the demand side as well. The institute has criticized the Bank of Korea for its monetary policy, calling for a more aggressive rate policy considering the rising concerns over deflation. The central bank said in an earlier report that consumption has contracted due to slowing investment in facility and construction. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
It's been more than a month since South Korea confirmed its first case of African swine fever in pigs at a farm. It was thought this would send pork prices surging, like an outbreak has in China, but in fact prices have fallen. Kim Hae-sung reports.
As of the end of October, pork prices at retail stores have fallen to about $1.50 per 100 grams. That's lower than last year's average and lower than average pork price for the past 5 years. Prices have dropped mainly as demand for pork in Korea has fallen out of worries that pork may be contaminated with African swine fever virus. A survey by Korea Rural Economic Institute shows 1 out of every 2 Korean consumers reduced their pork consumption in October compared to the same period last year, with 70% of them citing pork safety as the main reason.
I am worried, even though government authorities say contaminated pork poses no harm to humans. It could be that there's no research on the effect yet. So I don't plan to eat pork for about a year. The piglets from the culled pigs could have the virus too, so I am concerned.
As demand for pork has dropped in recent weeks, sales of chicken and beef have soared. According to eMarch, sales of pork between October 1st and 28th dropped around 13% on year. Sales of beef went up 20% on year, and chicken sales also went up. On top of lower demand, an increased supply of pork is also a reason for falling prices. The South Korean government carried out a preemptive culling of pigs in order to contain the spread of the disease. Farmers also released more pork into the wholesale market. As a result, wholesale prices have dropped by almost $1 to $2.70 per kilogram. Governments across the world and the World Organization for Animal Health have said African swine fever does not pose a health risk to humans, and there's no research showing it poses a risk, but concerns over pork safety remain in Korea. Heading forward, future pork prices depend on whether demand picks up and whether the disease can be contained in the northern parts of the country and whether the amount of culled pork in the wholesale market goes down. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So we're a day away from finding out whether the Fed is cutting rates again. There's widespread expectation that it will, but will it, and if so, what happens?
Sure. As you have said that they'll be meeting for next 2 days, and they will decide on the further rate cuts. So far, since July 30th, 31st, they've been cutting interest rate by twice, so it's been down by 0.5 percentage point. If they cut one more time tonight, there will be another 0.25%, so overall 0.75% cut. In terms of whether they will cut, right now the likely chance of the cutting, the projection is that 98.3% expects rate cut tonight. So the possibility is very high. With that expectation, equity market in general did quite well last 1 week or so. But yesterday, market took some breather as Dow was down slightly by 0.07%, S&P was down 0.08%, and the growth stock Nasdaq was down 0.59%. But that's because Nasdaq was up quite strongly in the previous 2 days by more percentage than S&Ps. So people are expecting rate cut, but they're just waiting till actual results comes out. They're taking some breather. So the market seems to be taking and see what happens to the rate cut and then what would be the commentary coming up from the FOMC.
Yeah, and as you said, stocks on Wall Street ended slightly lower overnight. The Kospi here in Korea today picking up where it left off the day before, continuing to fall a fair bit. What's the story in the markets today?
Sure. I think that people are worried that there is still concern about Fed might change its tone from continuation of rate cut to normal rate cut in the future. If the economy seems to be fairly stable, then Fed will probably finish with their so-called insurance rate cut. They've done that in 1998 by 3 times rate cut just for the purpose of the insurance because of the Asian market had a very strong, very sharp drop in terms of the prices, and the asset prices were crashing down in most of the Asian countries. So they used the insurance factor, so they cut 3 times interest rate at that time. But after that, inflation picked up very aggressively, and they didn't cut it anymore. And in fact, year after that, they start to raise interest rate very aggressively. So I guess people are concerned that if the Fed changes its tone, then the additional liquidity might not be coming in. And they may be thinking that that is a negative news, and therefore they're taking some breather in terms of equity market. So if you look at the Asian market, it's down slightly. Kospi is down about 0.6%. Kosdaq is down 0.5%. Most of the Asian markets down anywhere between 0.2 to 0.5%. Shanghai continues to trade, but nevertheless is still down about 0.6% or so. And I think that until the rate cut it actually happens, until we start to see the economy stabilizing, people might be taking some profits if Fed says they're not going to cut any more interest rate.
Got it. Well, shifting gears a little, cryptocurrency has been making the news this week with respect to China. Xi Jinping himself talking about it, and there's an official at the PBOC calling for the adoption of blockchain in banking. What's happening over there?
Sure. As you said, the cryptocurrency prices jumped drastically towards last weekend because Xi Jinping have said that in the meeting that China needs to focus more on blockchain technology. Clearly, this is the technology that leads the Bitcoins and all the cryptocurrencies. And the cryptocurrency price, the Bitcoin price soared as high as 40% over the weekend, and it continues to be fairly strong at this point in time. Now, the question is this, as U.S. being the so-called key currency market, whereas the renminbi is not. So clearly, when they are competing with the U.S., they think that they're in a back seat. So therefore, it's difficult to compete with the U.S. So one way of solving that problem is actually introducing some different means of a trading mechanism. So obviously, Bitcoin or the blockchain technology is something that is a necessity for China. China is clearly trying to focus on fourth industrial revolutions, and anything that related to digital currencies is something that is related to that fourth industrial revolution. So therefore, the overall process of China will be pro cryptocurrencies because they're looking into the next generation as the next era of the leader in the global economy.
All right, Mr. Yu, that's where I have to leave it today. Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, Samsung Electronics has unveiled a new flip phone that folds in half like a clamshell. Unlike the Galaxy Fold, which opens and closes side to side like a book, Samsung's as yet unnamed new phone folds top to bottom. Introducing the device on Tuesday at Samsung's annual developer conference in the U.S., a Samsung official said the company aims to create a more compact flip phone that can fit into a pocket and change the way people use their phone. The new model is set to be released early next year, but other mobile manufacturers also have been attempting to make similar flip phones, with Motorola set to release its own model on November 13th. South Korea is launching a new banking service that enables the user to access all their bank accounts from a single app. The service launches today in the test phase. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
Mobile banking saves us the trouble of having to actually go to a brick-and-mortar bank to transfer money or access our account. Having multiple accounts used to mean having to install apps for every bank you have an account with. However, thanks to the latest open banking service being launched in South Korea on Wednesday, bank account holders will only need one app to access all their different bank accounts. So how does it work? Say you have a checking account with Shinhan Bank, but a savings account with Uri Bank. Just the Shinhan Bank app alone will allow you to access your Uri Bank account as well. Along with Shinhan and Uri, a total of 10 banking institutions will take part in the beta test. However, when the service goes live on December 18th, other internet banks such as K-Bank and KakaoBank will utilize the service, as well as fintech companies such as Toss and Naver Pay. Not only will the new service be more convenient, but users will be exempt from transaction fees and receive other benefits.
It offers consumers higher deposit rates and lower loan rates, and when combined with fintech, they can offer a wide range of financial products combined with other technical features.
And with concerns of hacking, the new service has also strengthened security and consumer protection.
Only organizations that have been approved can participate in the open banking system, and only those that have undergone security checks.
Those in the industry are also looking into the possibility of allowing similar services at physical banks for users who have difficulty using mobile banking. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's administrative capital of Sejoing City is taking the first step towards self-driving public transport. With its first road test completed on Tuesday, the city hopes for passengers to be able to ride on these driverless buses by 2023. Choi Jung-yoon has this story.
A driver takes her hand off the steering wheel and her feet from the accelerator. The bus reads data from the traffic light and calculates when to stop and take turns. This is a self-driving bus that the city of Sejoing plans to demonstrate on public roads from next month. Self-driving buses have had several trials in a restricted testing environment. But this is the first time in Korea those buses have driven themselves along with regular vehicles in real traffic situations.
There were more concerns than excitement at first, but I was relieved to see the bus move smoothly and able to recognize pedestrians in dangerous situations. It was a bit frustrating as the bus gave way to other vehicles too often. It drove really slowly when making turns or changing lanes.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport will operate 2 of these Level 3 buses on roads as a test project, traveling a 9.8-kilometer route roughly twice a week. It will then scale up the project by operating 8 buses with Level 4 vehicles on a 35-kilometer route in 2021 and allow local residents to actually ride the buses, moving towards the final goal of commercializing the buses in 2023. Out of the 5 levels of driverless vehicles, a Level 3 car can carry out a range of autonomous driving functions, but the driver must be ready to take control. At Level 4, the vehicle is in full control under limited conditions. And at Level 5, a driverless vehicle can drive without any driver present. Experts say self-driving services in public transport might see commercialization earlier than normal vehicles, as the buses are driven on specific routes and are operated under central transport management systems, which makes it easy to collect data.
This minibus is an on-demand service. Users can download applications and set locations where to get on and off the bus. People with disabilities or who live in rural areas can benefit from this. As this is a human-free bus, it can bring efficiency in operations by driving 24 hours with shorter bus intervals.
However, in order to establish such a system in Korea, changes in the law on safety and regulatory issues are required. Clear standards on responsibility for accidents and insurance must be resolved. Sejoing, Arirang News.
It's been 12 years since liquid-type e-cigarettes were first introduced in Korea. But now the industry is facing its most uncertain period in years after the health ministry strongly warned people not to vape. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Just 1 week after South Korea's health ministry issued a strong warning not to use flavored liquid-type e-cigarettes, most of the nation's convenience stores have already yanked them from their shelves. The four main convenience store chains, CU, GS25, 7-Eleven, and Emo24, which together account for over 90% of the stores nationwide, have decided to either cancel orders for more e-cigarettes or to stop selling the products immediately. The first convenience store to react to the government's warning was GS25, run by GS Retail. It immediately stopped selling the flavored liquid-type e-cigarettes pods, Tropical, Delight, and Crisp pods made by Julabs, and Sit Tundra pods produced by Korean brand KT&G.
According to the health ministry's warning, GS Retail decided to stop selling flavored liquid-type e-cigarettes, and we cleared our shelves accordingly.
After GS Retail's announcement, other convenience stores, supermarkets, and major duty-free stores in South Korea also followed suit. Both vaping product maker Julabs and Korean brand KT&G agreed with the government's concerns, but Julabs stressed it does not manufacture products with THC or vitamin E compounds, which the U.S. CDC presented as the reason behind the lung disease cases associated with the use of vaping products. Thus, some say the ministry's measures were far too drastic.
I believe regulating liquid-type e-cigarettes because of one patient without investigating the casual relationship thoroughly is an overly hasty decision.
With e-cigarettes rapidly being expelled from store shelves, some people are scratching their heads about the ministry's seemingly knee-jerk decision, as it still doesn't have specific grounds for e-cigarettes' harmful effects on the human body. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The UK Parliament has voted to hold a general election on December 12th, backing Prime Minister Boris Johnson's proposal as a way of breaking the Brexit impasse. The election was approved easily on Tuesday in a vote of 438 to 20. Once Parliament is dissolved next week, the parties will start their campaigns, which will be dominated by Brexit. The EU has granted Britain 3 more months to ratify a deal on leaving the bloc, meaning lawmakers in the next Parliament will have until January 31st to do so. Boris Johnson will be looking to strengthen his mandate to do Brexit the way he wants. It seems the much-anticipated trade agreement between Washington and Beijing might not be ready to be signed in Chile in November, as expected. According to Reuters on Tuesday, U.S. officials said the agreement might not happen soon, but that doesn't mean the talks are collapsing. The official added that Washington's goal is to sign in Chile, but sometimes the text of a deal just isn't ready. He said, though, that progress is being made and they are still planning to sign the agreement in Chile. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.